So tonight is largely drawn from the Essence book. In other words, if somebody, it's, the elevator speech, you're in the kind of field where you've got to give an elevator speech, right? Well, maybe a little bit more than an elevator, but tonight is really that.
Okay, good.
What do you guys believe in? Okay. Next week, I was talking about the lives of the different gurus and their relevancy. Third class was all of our different techniques, from Ananda Yoga through Kriya and the higher Kriyas. Class 4 is what scriptural sources do we draw on? Quote. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes.
Oh, okay.
What I gave you tonight is pertinent to tonight.
Right, perfect.
So these are my notes. Class 5 is our history and our ceremonies and sort of lifestyle things. And then finally, class 6 is how we're governed and organized. Okay? So it's Ananda 101, the basics of how we work and what we do. So then turning to our sheet here, for fun, I thought to print out the dictionary of theology, cosmology, cosmogony, very few people have ever heard that, epistemology, none of which I hope to talk about.
Okay.
But this is the kind of thing that, segues into this subject, under more traditional things. Theology, the study of or definition of what is God, who is God, what's God all about. Cosmology is, what the universe is all about. In Genesis, first chapter is cosmology. God created the world, let there be light, blah, blah, blah. Chapter 2 goes to Adam and Eve. So that has to be a scripture or to be a full teaching in this way, it has to be both impersonal and personal. What's it mean to me? Suffering, evil, why am I here? And why are you here? Why is everything else here? So that's what those two are. The other is more scientific, cosmogony, which we don't deal with. And epistemology is basically, how do we know if anything's true? Now those studies are branches mostly in the Western sciences, although they do exist also in the Eastern. Most of us are simply not familiar with the Eastern variations on these terms and so forth. Morley has had some exposure to it, but I will guarantee or assure you that they're just as anal in the East as they are in the West when it comes to, definitions. So in a way, that's kind of the background noise to some of this stuff. So my purpose isn't to convince anybody, it's just to share what we're about. What Yogananda taught as best as I'm able to articulate it. Not to, the funny thing about yoga is that we really don't care that much about beliefs. But the funny thing about beliefs is if you don't have any, then you're not going to do anything. So it's not that simple. If you do yoga, you expect to get healthy maybe. If you meditate, you expect to have some mental hygiene. So whatever we do, particularly if it takes discipline, there's an expectation, there's a belief that it's going to cause an effect and we'll get the result. So we can't entirely discount belief. And in the elevator talk, do you go to Ananda? Well, what do you guys believe in? So that's kind of what it is.
I've always kind of had that feeling like the truth has no bearing on, your beliefs have no bearing as to whether or not it's true. You could believe in something, but truth is truth.
Yes.
It doesn't, it's not dependent upon your belief.
Exactly.
Right?
It's sort of like the world is flat, really. It doesn't, if you don't believe in gravity, does it not work?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very much the case. And as that term is here, Sanatana Dharma, one of the things Yogananda would talk about is that what he tried to articulate, what he claimed to articulate, was the distilled essence of East and West from the standpoint of basic core values and ways of viewing the world that more people than not could possibly agree on. And more than just voting as When I say people, I mean those who have achieved some measure of realization, Christ, Krishna, Buddha, etc. He also, along those lines, he also described what he was doing as the second coming to unite East and West. Jesus said, I will come again, send the Comforter, and Yogananda wasn't claiming to be that per se, but that the practice of meditation is how the Guru comes again inside. Jesus, as a Guru, came once. When he predicted his own coming, it would be here, not in the clouds. At least that's how Yogananda put it. Okay.
That's interesting. I haven't heard it articulated like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
No, that's good.
Probably when somebody asks me in the elevator about one thing that we do or teach or that would be hard to let go of, it would be reincarnation. Mm-hmm. Reincarnation is probably the fulcrum point, I would say, between East and West as it relates to, this way of thinking. What do I think? What do I believe? And how do I view the world, suffering, justice, evil, all the things that critically thinking people have to deal with. And I would say reincarnation is the one tenet without which nothing else really hangs together that well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could do yoga and meditation for personal hygiene, not a problem with that, of course. But beyond that, beyond the present body, beyond the present lifetime, that's sort of about it, So the one thing that distinguishes the East from the West is reincarnation. And reincarnation makes no sense whatsoever unless it's linked to karma. Mm-hmm. And in fact, even in the East, where it's been around a long time, but when it's misunderstood, it's often misunderstood as being whimsical and arbitrary, just like we in the West would see a baby born deformed or whatever, and we really can't account for that other than maybe, nowadays would say it's the genes or some medical reason, but in terms of, metaphysics, or the why of things, which is metaphysics, we don't really have an explanation. In the East, when people are ignorant, they will sometimes say, curse you so that you will be reincarnated as a bug, or, I mean, there is that kind of thing out there, but apart from that lower level of understanding, reincarnation supplies the cause and effect answer on which all modern science and modern living is based on. If I do X, I'll get Y. If I work hard, I'll make money. If I take care of my physical health, I'll be healthy. I mean, without that, we might as well just go home. If we don't believe that we can be a cause and affect our own life, life isn't worth living. Even if there's fate and other things that we can't predict, that basic central tenet is essential to human happiness. So it's linked, so karma and reincarnation are inextricably linked and really form the basis for largely what else follows. I forget the estimates, but the estimates of the number of people on our planet who either believe in reincarnation or just accept it or are open to it is way more than the majority statistically. I don't know what that is, but it's not like it's 80%, but it's certainly over 50% people. And including, interestingly, in surveys, a lot of Orthodox Christians say, oh yeah, because it just makes so much sense. So that's why that's my starting point. Once you buy into the idea that my life existence is continuous over space and time, then the question becomes evolution. I mean, do I just go up and down like from a bug to a cow to, And of course, obviously, with what I was just saying about karma, that can't be the case. There has to be a purpose or a direction to that evolution of my minus, which we call the soul, my essence. In India, you might know the term Atman, which is the individual soul. We don't make a big deal about concepts of soul, though we're happy we use the term frequently, but Yogananda never really, I mean, he was not a scholar or a theologian, so there was never any attempt to, whereas in some Buddhism and other places, they really make kind of a big deal about there ain't no soul, and yet they have to skirt around it because you keep reincarnating. It's like the Christians, if once they dedicated themselves to having one life, they had to patch it up with gum and Band-Aids. Oh, you go to limbo if you're a baby and you die, you didn't do anything wrong, you go there. And well, if you weren't too bad, you went to purgatory and, you know, got burned a little bit. And
You had waited out.
yeah, so they started sort of patching things up so the world didn't look so miserably unjust to do that. And the Buddhists do other workarounds in that way when they sort of posit the concept that there's no thing. And there's no continuum of existence, even though they believe in reincarnation. So it gets funky, is what I mean. Again, I don't want to terribly get too much onto what other people think or say, but for us, a key element which follows reincarnation and karma is that there is a direction and a purpose to our existence, and that direction and purpose of existence is to achieve freedom, to go back to where we came from, basically. It's not on my list, but in the nature of the soul, you know, an essential teaching of Sanatana Dharma is that the universe is simply the play of God. In other words, where in Genesis it says, and God so loved the world, or whatever, you know, but it doesn't really explain how. Where did all this stuff come from? Well, in the East, they say the how is the illusion caused by the motion and the play of opposites, heat and cold and so forth, which gives the illusion of reality. And so by that spinning, never-ceasing flux of an infinite number of opposites creates the illusion, which means that everything partakes in the divine reality, even though it's heavily masked one way or the other. And so our soul, which cannot be other, therefore, no more than anything else, but more conscious than most things, is therefore part of that divine reality. And so even though we now scientifically look at these vast epochs of time, well, if you were to put on a hat and say, I'm infinite, those things wouldn't really mean very much. Right now, you know, you think 80 years, you know, physical body, then it all seems kind of wacky. But when you put on the scientific hat and you start seeing things the way science does, whether in quantum physics or astrophysics, you realize that the quanta of time and space are incredibly large. And either we don't fit if we just have one body, one life, or we're part of that enlargement. We're part of that vastness. And that's essentially what the teachings of India and the East are saying, is that we are part of all of that. And that even though this great play is such that our illusion is that we're not, that's what we're here to unmask, is that illusion of who we are. That's why it's called self-realization. Who am I? That's our purpose. And then when he says, what is intuition? Sixth sense, the power of knowing God, that's the power of answering that. Who am I? And when you have you ever studied or read about Ramana Maharshi, for example?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, he was a South Indian guru who lived in the 20th century, became really popular, and there were newsreels about his life during the 30s and 40s, and got a lot of play in the time of Gandhi, and popularized a lot of these things. He essentially represented some of the things I just said in a very sort of philosophically austere way, though. But nonetheless, he did represent that tradition and became quite popular. This term, Satchidanandam, that goes way back in time, and there was a reformer of Hinduism who came after Buddha's time. Buddha was in the millennia coming into 0 BC, in the last 1,000 years. I don't know exactly the date, 400, 600 BC, Buddha appeared in India. He was a reformer too. And just as Jesus threw out the money changers from the temple, Buddha threw out essentially the same thing. He was saying, chop wood, carry water, enough of those priestly expensive rituals that you guys pay for. Very similar, trajectory, as it were. And of course ran into all sorts of trouble as a result. They didn't crucify him, but they gave him some trouble. But this Buddhistic teaching, which annihilated the whole caste system, was extremely popular down through the life, down to the 0 BC and for the first few hundred years of the first millennia. And later at the end of the first millennia, there was this one reformer, Swami Shankaracharya, the Adi Shankaracharya. Adi means first. And he was a young man. He only, like Christ, he only lived to age 33, I think. And he walked up and down all of India. And essentially, he didn't throw out Buddhism, don't get me wrong, but he began teaching in a way that reformed Hinduism from its worst excesses. And he didn't coin, but he employed the term Sat Chidanandam. Whereas Buddhistic philosophy after Buddha's time started to get atheistical, okay? Shankaracharya came and reaffirmed the notion of the divine, but instead of anthropomorphic, and all the deities and so forth, which was the bane of Hinduism, always has been, he defined God as the bliss that we all seek, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. So he reestablished the Vedanta philosophy that goes way back 10,000 BC. The God is one, like the Jews. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So Shankaracharya reaffirmed the Vedantic teaching of the oneness of all life. Okay, Buddhism, in an effort to reform, as I say, became nihilistic. No thing, etc. So he reaffirmed that and brought it back. And Yogananda used that term then as the basis of his teachings. When he came to America in 1920, he had ghostwritten, because his English wasn't so good, the book, The Science of Religion. And in that he posited the twin precepts of his life's work. One is that we're all born to seek happiness and avoid pain. Very Buddhistic, actually, if you can think about that. Except that it has these other concepts like God as bliss and so forth. But basically, what he was getting at is, if you think about our religious background, science has beaten religion down because religion has affirmed all these unprovable beliefs. Science comes up with all these provable things and enriches, I suppose, our lives. And so people say, well, gee, you guys can't prove nothing, and look what science has done, so I'm going to be a materialist. So Master, when he came, adopted a sort of behavioral therapy, which is, you want to be happy? Learn meditation, do yoga, be good to people. In other words, the beliefs for which religion had been, so critiqued, and still is, and for all the infighting that religion has, it became more of a behavioral, and that's really what we represent, in a sense, behavioral psychology from the standpoint of the soul, essentially. Now, there are these beliefs, but what we say, what Yogananda taught us, practice Kriya Yoga, practice asana, practice pranayama. And then, of course, all these other things which are common sense, but also universal, kindness, compassion, etc., harmony. And you will be a happier person. Whether you go to heaven isn't anybody's business, but you'll be a happier person. That's basically what he said. Now, I already mentioned Maya, duality, and movement. So in that movement, there is a concept in India that we don't find in Christianity that I've come across, which is the gunas, which is the nature of movement. Movement including thoughts, emotions, as well as objects, that the nature of creation has three core levels. One, that which enlightens us, awakens us, that which simply activates us, energy, and then that which darkens our awareness of our higher self. Objects like this are tamoguna, meaning they don't tell us anything. Not that they're bad, you're just saying they don't necessarily reveal anything. Mm-hmm. Intelligence and harmony and right attitude all reveal or share with us our connectedness, and therefore would be sattvic qualities, because they awaken us to a reality greater than the ego. So those particular things, which are somewhat self-evident, that particular teaching, which is all throughout the Bhagavad Gita, not all throughout, but also appears in the Yoga Sutras, does not really have a corollary in Christian dogma. All we have is, the guy with the horn and, the devil made me do it, right? And then we have, all the good guys, angels and Christ and so on and so forth. We don't really have a nuanced approach. I suppose when they did purgatory and limbo, they in effect did that. But anyway, I've always found it curious, because from most of the core precepts, I've always found a corollary in my Christian upbringing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Yogananda said, oh yeah, that's the same thing as taught in the East, that the Father Spirit, or God as Father, it's just an anthropomorphic thing, but that aspect of divinity which remains untouched and beyond the creation, we can call Father. That part of divinity which is very still and rests at the center of all this movement we were talking about, is the only begotten Son, the only reflection of that transcendent spirit to be found in creation. And then the creation itself as spirit is this ceaseless motion, the primordial version of which produces the Om sound. And so Sanatana Dharma reaffirms basically the Trinity teaching of Christianity. A lot of people get confused with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva with the Trinity. That's not the Trinity. Those are the three aspects of Om, which the motion of all creation having that, like the gunas, having that which comes out and creates, has that which preserves and sustains, and that which removes and destroys. So the movement of all creation is either coming into manifestation, is trying to hold itself in manifestation, or is dissolving. But it isn't the Trinity. I mentioned the Om vibration and the only begotten Son of God. Those are the two aspects of the Trinity. Vibration, in the early Christian church, there was a devotion to the Mother of Mary that sort of disappeared for a while and only came back during the latter part of the Middle Ages, when the Catholic Church began to emphasize a devotion to Mary, or some of the saints did actually. But that the holies, what we were taught as the Holy Ghost, was actually in the first few centuries deemed to be feminine, because that vibration of God which is the creation is seen to have the feminine qualities of nurturing, giving birth to, and sustaining. But and so it always made a lot of sense to me. I mean, when I came to this, to realize that the veneration of the Blessed Virgin has its roots in a deeply instinctual impulse in human nature to make the two equal. And of course, we see that happening today, the equality, and Master said, and Swami and others too, that our age will be a time when the worship of the feminine divine will gain in momentum, because it's needed to balance what we've all inherited in the father aspect.
2020.
So hang in there. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing because of what we see happening in the world today. It's necessary. It may not always be wise or balanced or pure, but it has to happen, whatever form it takes, because we have to bring it back into center between male and female manifestations. So,
Girl power.
yeah, exactly. Let's see. The need for a guru, I say they're sat, because there are teachers and there are gurus. Most of the world, including India, the word guru means generally just a teacher. No different there than here. Yogananda used the term, and we heard Ananda use the term in what he says was its original usage, or akin to the Christian usage, if nothing else, which is a Satguru, meaning a savior, somebody, an avatar, somebody who has divine power to bring a soul to freedom. And so this is a much more difficult teaching to understand, I think, for Westerners, although ironically it's built into Christianity. It's right there in front of us, just that it's exclusive and monopolized.
Right.
But the basic teaching, which I think is one reason why there's such a deep connection between Yogananda's life work and teachings and Christianity, is because Christianity acknowledges the importance and the role of the guru for the salvation of the soul, the uplifting of the soul. Now, we know in Christianity there have been great saints down through 2,000 years who, didn't live at the time Jesus in the body lived. So this is a much sort of bigger topic, because on the one hand it is big, but on the other hand it's also very personal. Swami would talk about even when Yogananda was in the body, he'd still have Kriyananda and other people initiate people, train them. He didn't do all that. It wasn't really a personal thing. But that power to uplift past the ego is very much a teaching from India. But the way I teach it or approach it is that until that realization comes from inside, you just have to walk your own path. For most people, especially since Yogananda isn't alive in the way that we think of people as being alive today, it's really kind of a moot issue. It's not that important. He's not here. So whether one believes in this precept or not, it doesn't really matter that much. It's the only place the rubber meets the road is that if someone wants to take Kriya, we ask, if they're willing to become a disciple of Yogananda. But what that means is up to them. I mean, we can't really tell you what it means.
Right. Is it believing in him, or is it doing X, Y, Z?
It's mostly, in this case, in terms of Kriya, mainly means I pledge to practice my Kriya every day. Beyond that, it's up to you and to find that attunement. It's like when you get married. That's the analogy I like to make, is you go to the altar. Some people go to the altar confidently, and it doesn't work out. Some people go to the altar with reservations, and it does work out. Sounds funny with reservations, but anyway. In other words, you don't know. You can't define a relationship in advance of the relationship. That's my point. And so long as someone is open to what's possible in that relationship and sees, let's say, Kriya as an instrument whereby that connection can be made, then it's up to you to explore it. So, But it is one of the things that we teach, that Yogananda taught. Going back to, or not back to, but talking a little bit about cosmology, have you ever heard of this phrase, day and night of Brahma, anywhere before?
No, I think just here.
Okay. It's an ancient Indian teaching. You'll find it in the Bhagavad Gita. You'll find it in the older scriptures, Vedas, etc. And it's a curious one because it's more of a scientific one than anything you have to believe in or what have you. But essentially, it says that the universe is manifested and then unmanifested rhythmically, periodically, over enormous periods of time. It opens the question of whether or not the universe has always existed, which, if you're into philosophy and stuff in India, is a big debate in India. We don't need to get into it. But in other words, there's the Vedanta teaching that all is God, and manifested reality, creation, objects are an illusion, that it is all God. Then you have the somewhat opposite teaching called Sankhya, which says, oh no, God is real and the universe is real, and that they're equal. Interesting teaching. And so, in that point of view, the universe has always existed, though it comes in and out of existence, sort of like we do as bodies and reincarnation, but that it's always been. And so I don't know what difference it would make to anybody's life, but it is worthy of acknowledging. So the day and night of Brahma says that the worlds are manifested and unmanifested in various time frames. Billions of years is all we know.
Wouldn't you have more attachment to the physical world and less prayer? And I mean, that's, for me, that's what it would be, as if
Yes.
if the universe was equal to heavens, or
Yeah.
it'd say there's more ego.
Well, I'll tell you where
right?
it comes into play. Dr. Lewis, Yogananda's friend and first disciple, once asked him in respect to this, he says, does that mean that let's say the whole thing vanishes for a while and comes back, do I have to start all over again? He said, no. Once you achieve liberation, you're free as a soul. You're in God and you don't have to worry about having to come back. But, yeah. Now, that segues into what you were just saying about astral and causal realms, heaven and hell, so to speak, which are aspects of it. Because we're often asked, do you believe in hell? And I say, hell no. And we do, except that it's not eternal. My response to that question, and I get it fairly often, is that you don't have to die to go to hell on this planet. There's hell inside people's minds and hearts. There's hell in certain places on this planet, outwardly. But yes, they're in the astral realm, devoid of this human body and left only with the astral and causal body. There are realms to which some souls will go that are cold or isolated. I don't know about hot, but in any case, are places where people do suffer on some level, psychologically or what have you, owing, obviously, to their own actions of perhaps selfishness. Yogananda said something that's a very delicate topic. I don't usually like to get into, but it did deal with suicide. Most families have had some experience with suicide, unfortunately, but he said sometimes a suicide, there's different kinds of suicide. There's ritualistic suicide, there's suicide that occurs as a result of addictive behavior and so forth. Ritualistic being extremely conscious on one end of the spectrum, and addictive suicide being extremely unconscious, and so forth, and then everything else in between. So it's hard to generalize, but if I kill you, I affirm my life. But if I kill me, I deny all life. And so the denial of the existence and value and innate goodness of life itself is, at least philosophically, as low as you can go in terms of a conscious act. Of course, according to the teachings, generally there's no such thing as unconscious, and it's not possible to kill life. But the affirmation that I want to kill my life goes to the very existential root of life itself. So, in theory, such a one will have to go through certain things in order to get that life back. And so what he said is that sometimes when a fetus is stillborn or dies in the womb or dies shortly after birth or something, sometimes those represent past suicides whose regaining of life is snatched from them because they denied it, and that they will have to keep doing that until the desire and love for life itself overcomes the karma from taking it, their own life. So,
But can they do that themselves, or do they need the prayer and help of others?
Yes, they do. Yes. Every teaching I've ever come across affirms that the prayers we offer to someone who's gone before, maybe taken their life, is very, very valuable, because they're caught in a self-enclosure of life denial and benefit more than most people actually from sending that life force to them with comfort, with joy, with peace, etc., with love more than anything. Absolutely.
This is related, but a little bit off topic, but did you ever see the movie What Dreams May Come? Robin Williams?
I believe I did, yes.
See, I've always heard in sort of the metaphysical realm that movie was as close of a portrayal as what it actually happens.
Yes, yeah.
Because when the wife took her life, when the children were killed, and
yes.
and then Robin Williams had to
go get
help her.
Help her, that's right.
Had to really,
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I've never heard Swami comment on that movie particularly, but I would absolutely endorse that because of our connection with one another, and because you can never really kill life as such. But the affirmation to do so bears certain consequences. But as I say, there's a lot of different forms of suicide and or intentions behind suicide that also need to be taken into account. Somebody who is basically loving, but who, because of tragedy, takes their own life, that's almost like that's a moment in time. It's not necessarily deeply existential. So I think there's a lot of mitigating factors that make generalization difficult.
Right.
Yeah. In chapter, I forget the number of the chapter, but in the autobiography, the Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar chapter is a fun expose of what it's like to go into, like that movie, into the astral and causal realms and how one gets to each. And I won't particularly go into that, but
You'll have to reread
I was talking to a friend the other night, and he was an IT person, and he seemed to like this explanation. I said, the physical body is like the hardware, and the astral body is like the software. And the hardware can die, but the software can be moved over to other hardware. And it's the software that carries the DNA, if you will, of our karma from body to body, from lifetime to lifetime. And that DNA, that body of light, has within it all of the intentions and actions and emotions and all those little vrittis, seeds and so forth are lodged in the body of light. And that's why they carry forward. As we work out the different impulses that bring us back to physical existence, and then even on the astral plane, if one becomes free of all material desires, lives there. When they die, when you die, then you go for a rest on the causal sphere of the soul, of pure bliss, rest for a time, come back to the astral realm, because if you have desires for beauty or music or pure friendship and so forth, and then you work out those, and then you go to the causal realm, at which point the only thing left is absolute power to manifest everything. I mean, you're so close to infinity itself. I guess you get over that eventually. I haven't yet had that desire, but apparently when you have it, it's like winning the lottery, you know.
Do you think that the causal, being on that causal level, is like, when you read the stories from people from India and Tibet, and they're able to just manifest at will, you know, that sort of thing?
Yes, very much so.
They're there.
Yeah. Patanjali talks about some of that in the Yoga Sutras, the different siddhis. Yeah, absolutely. Because to achieve that level of manifestation, you have to be so non-attached, not just to your physical form, but even to your astral form.
Yeah.
You've got to be very soul conscious. See, the soul appears on the causal realm of ideation, thought, separateness. But it has no form, has no body, has no personality, has no karma. Then, as it manifests further and takes on a body of light, it takes on the desire for separateness, the desire for different qualities and attributes. So the ego appears on the astral level, and then it manifests the physical body. So yes, to have that level of power, you have to have a high degree of contact or identification with the soul as such. Have you read some of the Tibetan things, or
Right.
Milarepa or other things?
I'm trying to think of the series
The
that I read.
Masters.
Yeah, Masters,
Mhm.
Many Lives, Many Masters.
Mhm.
That's what I was thinking back to.
Yes.
Those
Yes,
books.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just got a few minutes, I'm not doing bad.
So will we talk about like the Gayatri mantra later, or is that kind of like the...
Yes, that's going to be
Okay.
when we
Okay.
get to, no, really, serious. That's
It's
going to
like the
be when we
Brahma,
talk
right?
about the ceremonies.
Okay.
Class 5.
Okay.
Gayatri mantra, yes. What's left here, just a few things, is breath mastery, environment, karma. That's a particular thing I'll mention, and then of course the stages of evolution. I think with us here, we understand that pranayama, whether it's kriya or, well, let me put it this way. Here at Ananda, and in respect to what Yogananda brought, an essential aspect we represent is that controlling the breath liberates the soul. It's really that simple. If we can, and this is a yogic tenet, but it's one that we emphasize especially. Different lineages emphasize different things. But with Kriya and other things, our emphasis is simply that bringing the breath and heart rate under control, one frees the mind to perceive subtler realities, soul realities, and thus accelerates its spiritual. It's really that simple. In chapter 26, he says, breath mastery, something like this, is India's contribution to the treasury of human knowledge. The fact that by stilling the body and the mind, one can have a direct perception of one's divine reality, divine nature, and that's the key to freedom. So we're really Methodists. We have a method. And that's really what we're all about. Everything else is there to sort of help people. Ceremonies and seva, service, etc. I mean, it's all very important for most of us, but in the essence of it is breath mastery. And that's their undying contribution to human knowledge. So that really gets down to it. But a corollary of that, when we think of ceremonies and seva and satsang and study, is that the environment in which we live is stronger than our individual willpower. And you need that corollary to breath mastery, lest people come here, get trained in, let's say, call it Kriya, and then go off and imagine they're going to achieve liberation. Some souls can do that, but they're already highly advanced if they can. And so the corollary, that's what's meant by self-realization fellowship. Self-realization is breath mastery, fellowship is satsang. Or as Jesus put it from the Old Testament, the first law is to love God, the second is to love your neighbor. And it's really the same teaching. You know, we are one, basically. My only point on good karma versus bad karma versus no karma is this. Good karma helps eradicate bad karma, but good karma is not enough for liberation. It's just good karma. It's still karma. So the whole thing about breath mastery is to achieve a transcendent state where there's no karma. So that takes the spiritual teachings of East and West to a different level than just being good and going to heaven. Because going to heaven, unless it is forever, which we don't represent that teaching, means you've got some good karma in the karma bank, but it just means you're going to use that up.
You're only getting to the astral plane.
Exactly. So that's the good karma versus bad karma versus no karma.
Or transcendent karma.
Pardon me?
Karma transcendent.
Exactly. We're here to Nishkam karma, Krishna calls it in the Bhagavad Gita. And then finally, the different stages of our soul's awakening is that the Jivan Mukta is one who has achieved final samadhi, known as Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which means that soul is forever free, but, there's always a but, right? But there's past karma. So this soul has achieved the cosmic vision, but then has a whole baggage train of past stuff. So the Jivan Mukta is not fully liberated in that sense, but is forever free. So that Jivan Mukta can keep reincarnating, can keep helping people, and gradually can work out their karma. Time, that such a soul doesn't really care about time and space. They're free, they're happy. But they do have baggage, relationships with people maybe, relationships to health, all sorts of stuff that now that they're free, they're going to be untouched by, but somebody has to work it out. And all they have to do is essentially untie, they can't, here's the funny thing in Patanjali's, you can't go back, if I started a forest fire or I killed somebody in a past life, I can't unkill them. But I can untie the knot that I was the doer. I didn't kill them. It sounds funny to say.
Somebody else way back when.
Well, yeah, this schmuck.
That other dude. The other dude.
My identification with having been the doer is now severed.
Releasing that.
Yeah. So then when that's all done, they become a siddha, or sometimes known as a paramukta. And if that soul ever takes incarnation again, then it is known as an avatar. Completely free, no impulse to come back to do anything except purely to help people. So those are the three stages, basically, of freedom. So look at that. Not too bad.
Wow.
6:02. I mean, one of my things was to stick with just an hour. You know, so it would be manageable for people.
It's really good. Yeah.
Particularly if it's more heady stuff like this particular, like these courses are, and so forth. So is any of this useful to bring back to your recollectedness?
So if you were kind of encapsulate this overall, really the foundation of Ananda is these two books.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But Essence does what I just did, except that you have to read it. And in here he talks about karma, reincarnation, the need for the guru, the astral, causal planes, everything I just talked about is what he talks about here. Breath mastery, the whole 9 yards. It's a wonderful book, and we do study it in other contexts, like in the Kriya training we study it and so forth, but it's just so much easier to do something like this.
Right.
So,
I may have to reread it.
Me too. And that's, my next question was, in anticipation of next week's, is there something that we should read? Or is there anything like?
that's a good point.
That
I
to be
need
a
to
homework.
develop that syllabus, yes. For next week, the chapters in autobiography that deal respectively with Sri Yukteswar, Lahiri, and Babaji are the chapters you'd want to read.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no need to read anything on the life of Christ for most of us, and he doesn't officially have a chapter on Christ, but those three are the ones that,
He's throughout the whole book.
yeah. You know, who is Babaji? He's kind of off the charts. What's he like? Lahiri is much more approachable. Sri Yukteswar is approachable, but you maybe wouldn't want to, because he was so austere and strict. But yeah, that would be the homework assignment.
Okay.
And I need to develop that syllabus. This particular Ananda 101, I didn't want to ask anybody to buy any books.
Right.
So my idea for this one, because the other courses all have books, but
Right.
this one I'm saying, anybody new coming, I'm going to tell you basically, in a user-friendly format, what this is all about.
Right.
You won't have to read anything.
And then you can go back and read
That's
more
right.
in depth.
Yeah.
At your will. Yeah.
That's the idea.
As inspiration is sparked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if each week we'll have more people coming.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I expect, but
Right.
it takes a while.
Well, sure. And plus, they may think, Ananda 101, I've got that down. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And so the months ahead, we'll do and it's spread, it's not continuous. There'll be a month on the Bhagavad Gita. There'll be a month on the Yoga Sutras. There'll be a month on the Bible. And maybe there's one or two others, I don't recall. But just sort of scattered through the year so that every year we offer some kind of orientation about what, because otherwise, as you say, there's never been anything.